What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Eluda Racing. Today we're going to kind of switch things up a little bit. I know in the previous videos I mentioned that I got the golf cart and I was going to do some stuff on the cart, and I just figured we've been working real hard on the Maverick, and I wanted to just kind of switch things up a little bit and start doing some of the upgrades and the mods on the golf cart. So I figured today's a cold, rainy day here in Michigan. What better to do on a day like today than start on a lift kit? So like I mentioned before, I've got a lot of things I'm going to be doing with this. We're going to go with the 6-inch lift. I've got the oversized tires, and we're going to do a wrap on it. I was kind of kicking back and forth between getting it painted and getting it wrapped and things like that, and I just kind of weighing out the options as far as prepping the body to get a proper paint job. I mean, it would be a lot more money, and I figured let's go the wrap route. You can get them for a lot less, and the quality now is top notch. I mean, to the untrained eye, if you get a wrap and it's done right, most people could not come up and walk up and know that it was a wrap. So that was the other thing, is the cost and just the ease. I can take it in, drop it off, I'll prep it. I got a local guy that's going to do it here in Michigan, and I mean, it's going to be a one-day turnaround, and it's, you know, I'll bring it back, throw the windshield on and all the trim and stuff that I take off, and I mean, we're up and running in, you know, a matter of 2 days, and for a lot less than what a high quality paint job would cost. So yeah, just real quick, I wanted to go over the lift. I don't know much about this company. It's from a company called Freedom Off-Road Power Sports, and I'm going with a 6-inch axle drop lift kit. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with what an axle drop lift is, but basically what it does is it takes the front end, there's your front axle, and it's going to, they rebuild that and they drop it. And that's what the new axle looks like. You can see it has this drop down, this curvature to it, and that's how you achieve your lift. You reuse your factory spindles, and you just put this drop down, and I mean, it's a much better lift. A lot of guys, they go the cheap route, and rather than using this drop down, they'll just get spindles that are bent down. They're way weaker, they don't hold up, and to be honest with you, if you got a cart that's souped up with big tires and stuff like that, they're actually pretty dangerous. So I mean, if you're going to do a lift kit, guys, save yourself the trouble and get a good high quality lift. I mean, this kit, I've never used this company before, but I mean, we're talking almost 1/4-inch thick steel here. I mean, probably 3/16. This stuff is beefy. This front axle weighs 40 to 50 pounds. I mean, it's all high quality, good stuff. So do yourself a favor and look into them. I think you'll be pretty pleased. But it comes with the front drop axle. You've got your lift blocks for the back, shock mounts. We got new tie rod ends, bunch of nuts and bolts, new steering bar for your tie rod ends, and I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what this is for. I think it's something to do with the steering, just based on the pivot and stuff like that, so we're going to find out. Hopefully I'm not missing something, but because I did not get a inventory sheet with this, what you see is what you get along with the basic instructions. So this is going to be kind of more of a do-it-yourself. The instructions are pretty vague, and I mean, you'll definitely want to check it all out and really look and kind of lay it out and see everything that you've got, and make sure that you have everything you need to do the kit before you've got your cart tore apart in a million pieces. So that's kind of what I'm going to be doing today, is I'm going to get the front end of the cart up on the jack stands, and start looking at it and laying out the kit and just make sure that I've got. Now the way this kit works too is you're going to utilize some of the old parts. Like on the back you're going to use the factory U-bolts. It doesn't come with new U-bolts. I kind of wish it had new U-bolts, and I'm actually kind of thinking about buying new U-bolts. You got to pull the leaf springs. They want you to reuse the leaf spring bolts. They always get all rusty and stuff like that. Sometimes they break when you're taking them off. So I'm kind of thinking about maybe ordering all that stuff rather than trying to use penetrant oil and then heating it up and getting it apart. And I mean, I'd rather just put an impact on there, snap the stuff off, and then put on new stuff. And I mean, I'm on a budget. I'm not gonna lie, I'm on a budget on this. It's a budget build, but I don't ever cut corners and I don't go cheap. I would rather wait and get the best that I can get and do it right the first time rather than redoing it or cutting corners or using some garbage. So I mean, I'm gonna let my daughter drive this, my wife drive this, friends and family and stuff like that. So it's gonna look cool, it's gonna be badass, but it's also gonna be safe and it's gonna be reliable for whoever's on there. I would never ever think about rigging something and then letting somebody drive it and have to worry about it breaking or coming apart and someone getting hurt. So if you're gonna do it right, or don't do it at all. But anyway, so I'm gonna turn on the time lapse, and alright, so we're gonna go ahead and do some time lapse here while we set up the jack and start jacking this thing up and tearing it down. So we're gonna kind of be doing back and forth here. Alright, we got the front tires off, front rims and tires, and the next thing we need to do is we need to pull this cover off. Now, upon closer inspection on here, this has never been taken off from the factory. This is all original. These are rivets right from the factory, so you're going to have to drill these rivets out. If you do not want to drill these rivets out, you have another option, which is a little bit more time consuming and a little bit more difficult to do. But on the back side of this cover, you've got a support bracket that those rivets are going to. They go up to the back of the chassis, or the front, the firewall of the cart, and it's held on by bolts up there. So I do not know if you can see that or not. I'm going to grab a light just in case. Yeah, so if you don't want to drill it, I'm just going to drill them. But if you look there, behind the shock right here, they look like they're 10mm bolts. Take those off, and then the bracket will come off with this front cover, and then you've got two more bolts up there. So those are your options. Two bolts up top and drill out the rivets, or leave the rivets, two bolts up top and two bolts in the back. I think I'm going to leave the rivets, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the bolts to get this off. You also, while you're doing that, once you get that off, we need to undo these shocks and then quite a bit more. Alright, so we got the cover off. Just a quick correction, I think I said 10 millimeter on these bolts. They're actually 3/8. I don't know what I was thinking. EzGo doesn't really use any metric bolts as far as that I know. So it's 4 3/8 bolts. You've got the 2 up top, which are up here. A little bit easier to see. 2 up there on that rail. And then the other 2, which kind of come in, are here and there, and those are for the bracket that I was talking about. That's pop riveted from the factory. So once you get that off, it opens up the whole front end, and basically on this lift kit we're going to be getting rid of this whole axle right here, swapping out with that other axle, that drop axle. So we need to start tearing some stuff down. We're going to disconnect the shocks first. We need to undo the front leaf springs, disconnect the tie rod ends. I would pull the spindles off while the axle is still attached to the cart, just because then you can get a little bit better leverage as far as breaking those bolts loose, because those are supposed to be pretty tight from the factory. If they're not, then I mean you're lucky, but just to give you a little bit better leverage, I would crack them loose while this is all still intact. So let's knock this thing out. Alright, so now we got to pull this spindle off and all these steering components. So I just wanted to do the passenger side first. We got a lot more going on this side rather than on the driver's side, the left side. So just a recap, or I shouldn't say a recap, but the tools that you're going to need to do this. Spindle, nut, and bolt are 3/4, and like I said, this is going to be really tight. I went ahead and pre-loosened this up, but you're definitely going to want to leave this axle on the cart before you try to take this off, just because of the effort that it takes to get this thing loose if you're using hand tools and not an impact. 3/4 inch, pull that off. You've got your steering linkage here, and then you've got your, I guess you could call this your tie rod, or this is part of your rack and pinion. 11/16 here, or no, 5/8 here, 11/16 down here. These are both pre-loosened. These aren't that tight. This stuff all came off real easy. And then, like I said, down below for the steering for the rack and pinion is 11/16 for down below. Once you get this off, I would also recommend, I pre-sprayed all this stuff with breakaway. I like that seafoam penetrating oil that I showed you before when I was doing the exhaust. That stuff works real good. But I pre-treated all this stuff with that. That way you didn't have to fight with it. Alright, now we need to get this linkage. Both these linkages need to come off of this steering arm. Usually if you hit that, let me go grab a better hammer. You're gonna need like a metal hammer. A mallet won't give you the shock. If you hit the steering arm, you can usually shock this and this will drop right out, but a rubber mallet's not gonna do that. Alright, so once you, like I said, you're going to want to use a good hammer. Don't use a mallet's not going to work. You need something metal to metal to create a shock. And I mean, these things are literally going to drop right off. You smack them once or twice and you shock this metal, and this linkage is going to drop down and this one will pop loose where you can lift up on it. I mean, it's that simple. I already took the spindle, or the nut off the spindle, or the kingpin. There you go. Now this had a spacer, and that was on the top, so this is all reused. This is all got to be greased up. Whoever, the guy I got this from, did not take care of this thing. Didn't disclose a lot of problems wrong with it. So before you get a golf cart, guys, too, you know, kind of check it out just like you would a car. I mean, because as little as these things are, as popular as they are, people are getting good money for pieces of shit. So really check them over and make sure you're not buying just something that should be put out to a scrap bin, and rather than selling it to somebody, because there's guys that are trying to pass off rusted out pieces of crap, and they're getting top dollars for them because people just don't realize the maintenance and stuff that's involved in keeping one of these. They put them up for sale on Craigslist and different places and say that they run and drive great and they just need new batteries or something like that, and then they're not letting you know that speed controls are burnt out, chargers don't work, batteries are shot, suspension shot. I mean, if you went through one of these things, you could put a few $1,000s into it in a second. I'm going to have over $2,000 into a lift kit and tires, and I mean, the batteries are over $1,000. I mean, I can just throw $1,000 bills out the window left and right on this thing if I wanted to. So just do your due diligence and check into it and really look it over before you buy it, so you don't get a pile of crap. So anyway, this side's off, and that's pretty much it on this side. We got to rinse and repeat on the other side, and then at that point we've got to undo the shocks, we've got to undo the springs from the axle, and then we have to undo the rack and pinion, and then we'll be able to take this front axle and toss it to the side. Alright, so we got the steering linkage out. Now that new kit comes with a new linkage. I haven't compared them yet. I don't know if that one's longer or shorter. I do know it comes with the 2 new tie rod ends, and it comes with this bar. So I'm gonna have to look. I don't know if it's just, like I said, I don't know if there's a length difference there or what the deal is. It may be a beefier linkage, but for whatever reason they do include that with the kit, so obviously we're gonna reuse it. Even if it looks the same, it's there. Might as well put nice new ends on there and stuff like that, so start off with fresh stuff. So let's go ahead and break this spindle nut loose, and that way we can pull this spindle off. Alright, so we got the other spindle off. One thing I would recommend also for you guys is when you're doing this, pull this cap off and check your wheel bearings. I mean, you know, they're more than likely they've never been greased, just because most people don't maintain equipment like this. So pull those off, inspect them. They're probably going to be loose. Mine had a little bit of slop in them. You can adjust that slop out, and you know, check your grease and stuff like that, and you know, just do a little bit of maintenance while you got this thing all apart and you're doing this. You'll just be, you know, you'll be getting ahead of the game, and it's just something less that you have to do later on. So when you've got it off, you know, clean this all up, grease it all up, check those wheel bearings, tighten them up accordingly, and you'll be happy that you did that. It'll save you trouble down the road. Because one thing too is you got to remember, you're putting a bigger tire on here. You're putting more wear and tear on all these components. You've got a lot more leverage on there because of the size. So anything that's weak and is potentially going to fail, that is going to be accelerated that much more by going to the bigger rims and tires. So maintenance is important, and breakage is evident. So you want to definitely, not evident, inevitable. So you definitely want to prevent that as long as possible. Grease up your stuff, and you know, inspect it thoroughly and replace as needed. Alright, so we run into a little bit of a problem here. As I was starting to take off the shocks, as you can see, shock snapped right off. So as much as I didn't want to have to do it, I'm going to have to now buy new shocks for this. So I went ahead and saved myself the trouble. I'm not going to put one new shock on. I just got the Sawzall out and I cut this one off, which sucks because as bad as these things look, they're actually good shocks. They're not blown out. So it would have been nice to not have to replace them. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and order them. I've got to order some other stuff too. This boot right here for the rack and pinion, I mean, it's falling apart. I'm going to order that. If they don't sell that, what I'm going to do is you can get a aftermarket like Rancho shock dust boot, and you could use one of those. It's going to be the same configuration. This is around the size of a shock body, around 2 inches, and you could retrofit something to make that work really, really easy. So with that being said, I guess we're just going to call this front lift kit, and then I will do this part 1, and I'm going to go ahead and finish removing this, but unfortunately we're not going to get this all put back together and done today. Alright, so now that we got the issue with the shocks squared away, obviously those are going to have to be ordered. I'm going to go ahead and pull this front steering off, and we'll get this front axle out of the way. There's still a lot of stuff I can do as far as disassembly and reassembly today. So we're going to need to, what we're going to work on next is pulling this rack off. And we've got 3 bolts that hold this rack on. We've got one here, and then one in the back. And these are 5/8 nuts and bolts. So we're going to go ahead and buzz these loose, and you don't need to disconnect your steering shaft or anything like that. Just kind of unbolt it and just kind of let it flop out of the way. It might even sit on top of the leaf springs, because we need to pull that off to get access to the leaf springs. And then once those are disconnected, this front axle can be taken off and tossed. Now once you, as you can see, I've got the rack off. I was just a few seconds. You're going to remember, want to remember when you're pulling this rack off, you've got these spacers. And you've got 2 spacers here on the left that the rack sits on. And then this one, you've got a shorter spacer, a nut, and then the bolt goes through, and then that's what is, so it kind of gets pinched on there. So you're going to want to remember the orientation of the way these spacers go and everything like that. So that way you don't put it on wrong, and it'll, you know, it's not going to sit level and it's not going to be proper. So just pay attention when you're disassembling that you take it off in the proper order, and then also remember how it goes back. Take some pictures, do whatever you can to try to remember, but just wanted to point that out. Alright, so we're about ready to pull this front axle off. Now in order, once you get just to kind of summarize, once you get to this point, the only thing after you pull your rack and pinion off is you have your two front leaf springs. Those are held on by, basically there's a perch underneath here, and it essentially squeezes the leaf spring in between that bracket and the axle, and it's just kind of a pinched in there. So once you undo these 3 bolts, that perch is now loose, and this guy can be lifted right off the leaf springs once you get your shocks up out of the way. And you can lift this. It's kind of hard with one hand, but let's see what we can do here. I just dropped that. So there we go. Factory mount, or factory front axle, is now gone. These are those brackets that I was talking about, and those basically go through the leaf like this, and that kind of pinches everything between that bracket, the leaf, and the bottom of that. So your new drop axle which is this guy. Basically just sits like that. And I want to do a little bit of prep before I put this back together. Do a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of painting and stuff like that. We've got some rust and stuff like that I'd like to address. And like I said, I've got to order those shocks. I've got to order the boot for the rack and pinion. And I want to do that prep stuff. So we'll kind of do some updates on that. And I'll bring you along with the ride on that as well. But I'm going to wrap up this video now, and this is basically going to be just part 1, disassembly of the front end for the lift kit. I appreciate everybody that's watching, the new subscribers. Thank you. Spread the word. You know, I'm looking to build the channel and get it tons and tons of people. And I appreciate your comments and stuff like that, and your support. So if you have any questions or any comments, please remember and put them down below. And if you're new or you're just watching for the first time, like and subscribe and turn on your notifications, because as I go further along with this, you'll be updated, because I'm gonna get this kit here all done as fast as I can. I'm gonna get these parts on order today, and hopefully I can get them really quick. Worst case scenario is I've got a ton of golf cart places around local. I may just buy them local tomorrow, and that way I can speed this up and get this front end on, and then that way I can move on to the back and get the lift kit done, because I'm looking to get this over to the wrapper here and get the wrap done within a week. The weather's breaking. Other than today, it's been really nice 60s and stuff like that, so I'm looking to get this thing together and get it looking good for the summer for the family. So talk to you soon. Alright, so we're starting to go ahead and put the drop down axle on. I went ahead and did some painting and some touch up and a little bit of rust repair, and we got everything looking good. Went ahead and painted the leaf springs and stuff like that. I've got the drop axle in place. If you remember, when I was taking it off, we had this special spacer and stuff configuration for the rack, so I just wanted to show you before I went ahead and put that on, to make sure that when you are reinstalling this, lay it all out, kind of get everything, like I've got everything kind of in place. I'm going to make sure and double check that I've got everything correct, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to lock this down, tighten this down before I put the rack on, and then I'm going to go and do the spindles and, you know, keep on going. I'm going to work on it. There's no sense in letting it sit just because I'm waiting on shocks. Alright, so we got the spindles on. I went ahead, like I said, pumped these spindles full of grease, cleaned up the bolts, and got those nice and free. Now when you're putting these spindles on and you're tightening those down, you got to remember, don't over tighten these. You know, I mean, like I have a habit of wanting to have things over tightened, and that's bad in this instance, because what will happen is if you over tighten this, this will get crushed in, which will cause this to bind up. This needs to be tight, but it needs to be free moving. And when I say that, because if you over tighten these and they bind up, it's going to put wear and tear on the steering, and it's going to make it harder to steer than it should be. And it's already going to be a little bit harder because you're going to an oversized tire. So you want to make sure that these pivot freely, but without slop. And those have a lock nut on them, meaning there's a nylon washer built into it to prevent them from backing off. So it's just important you get them nice and tight, but do not over tighten them. Pretty much now we've got the rack done, front drop axles done, spindles are reinstalled. We've got to work on the steering, and then this thing's going to be ready to put back together, or button up I should say, not put back together. We're already doing that. But yeah, so I've got to do this steering linkage and figure out and set that up. You have to, there's some toe in that you have to do for the wheels and stuff like that. So we're getting close here, guys. Well, due to the wonders of technology and a computer glitch and GoPro, you can see got a little bit more done than where I was at with my last video. So I lost some material. I wasn't going to redo it, so we're just going to kind of take up from where we left off at, and I apologize about that. But as you can see, we've got the drop axles installed, steering linkage is installed, steering riser has been installed, which is this guy right here. The toe in has been set. Once you get everything on, you need to set your toe in. And if you're not familiar with toe in, that would essentially be your left and your right tire are aiming in towards one another, and you want to be on probably a 1 to 2 degree toe in, a little bit of an angle inward. And what that does is that gives you stability at higher speeds, and it doesn't cause you to want to kind of wander around the road. So you always want to have a little bit of toe in, and that will help stabilize the cart at higher speeds and stuff like that. So we're waiting for the shocks. You guys remember the shocks broke. We've got to do that. I'm going to throw the tires on and actually get this down off here, off the jack stands, just so I can take a look at it and do a little bit before and after type of photo. But this is basically the front front suspension in a nutshell, the front lift kit. We're going to throw the shocks on once they come in, and that boot for the rack and pinion. But this kit is done, and I'm going to do one more quick summary once I get the tires on, and I'll show you what it looks like with the lift kit on the front, and then that way you can also see the difference between the front and the back and how much of a lift this is. And just like that, the front is done. Rims are on, towing has been set, everything's locked down and tight. Just wanted to close out the video with a little bit of before and after, just so you guys could see the difference on this thing, on how much this kit makes a difference on the lift. Like I said, I can't say enough about this kit. I really enjoyed it. It's high quality. This is a 6-inch kit. Most of the other ones are 4 and 5 inch, so it's well worth the money. You can pick them up for, I want to say, about $150, depending on where you go. Amazon, eBay, they're available through everybody. But yeah, so the shocks are coming in a couple days, and then we'll get the shocks installed, get that boot on, and then we can put that front cover back on and cover this all back up so you don't see it. But yep, just wanted to close this out and show you a little bit of after of what it looks like with the wheels and stuff on. So if you're new, please, like I said, like and subscribe and turn on notifications. I'm going to be doing the rear lift starting tomorrow, and we'll just do this kind of like a 2-part series, front lift, rear lift type deal. So talk to you soon. Thanks again.